The fluorescent lights in the school hallway flickered ominously as I huddled against the cold metal door. My heart pounded like a drum, each beat echoing the terror coursing through my veins. I clutched the note in my trembling hand, a hastily written message that had sent shivers down my spine. Stay in your classroom. Lock the doors. Don't make a sound. It was a typical Friday afternoon, and the sun had been shining just moments ago. But now, the school was cloaked in an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional creaking of the building settling. I tried to steady my breath, but fear had its grip on me. Earlier that day, rumors had swirled through the halls about a disturbance in the town. Whispers of something unnatural, something inexplicable. The teachers had grown increasingly uneasy as they gathered us in our classrooms. The principal's voice over the intercom had been unsteady, his words tinged with fear as he announced the lockdown. My classmates sat in huddled groups, their faces pale and drawn. The windows were covered with thick curtains, blocking out any view of the outside world. We had no idea what was happening out there, only that we were supposed to stay put. I glanced at my best friend, Sarah, who sat beside me. Her eyes were wide with terror, and her fingers clutched the edge of her desk. "What's going on?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I shook my head, unable to find any words of comfort. We were all in the same boat, trapped in our ignorance, forced to confront our deepest fears. Time seemed to crawl, and I could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on us. Outside the classroom, strange noises drifted through the thick walls, a mixture of distant screams and unsettling guttural sounds. It was as though a malevolent force had descended upon the school, and we were its helpless prey. Hours passed, and our anxiety grew. The note in my hand crumpled as I clutched it tightly, as if it held the answers we so desperately needed. The intercom remained silent, and the teachers offered no explanation. We were abandoned in our fear, left to wonder if we were the last survivors in a world gone mad. As darkness crept through the windows, the school became a sinister labyrinth. The flickering lights cast long, grotesque shadows on the walls, and I couldn't help but imagine that something lurked within them. Sarah's trembling hand found mine, and we exchanged a knowing look. We had to make a decision. With cautious steps, we approached the door and peered through the small window. What we saw sent a shock of horror through us. The hallways were no longer empty. They were filled with grotesque figures, their bodies contorted and their movements unnatural. They shuffled and twitched, their eyes vacant and soulless. My heart raced, and I stumbled back, pulling Sarah away from the door. Whatever was out there, it was not human. Panic consumed us as we realized that the note's warning wasn't enough. We were not alone in the school, and our lives hung in the balance. Now huddled against the cold metal door, we waited in darkness, praying for morning to come and hoping that whatever had taken over our school would eventually leave. But as the night dragged on, we couldn't shake the feeling that the horrors lurking in the shadows were waiting for us to make a move. We were trapped in a nightmare, with no way out and no end in sight. The hours stretched into an agonizing eternity, each minute filled with the dread of the unknown. We had no way to contact the outside world, no way to know if help was on the way or if we were completely isolated. Our only source of information was the haunting sounds that occasionally echoed through the halls. As the night deepened, the eerie figures in the hallway became more active, their movements growing increasingly erratic. Some of them pressed their contorted faces against the small windows of our classroom door, their hollow eyes locking onto ours. It was as if they could sense our presence, and the fear that gripped us tightened its hold. Sarah and I dared not speak, afraid that even a whisper might draw the attention of those abominations. We clung to each other, our fingers intertwined, seeking solace in the warmth of our friendship amid the cold terror that surrounded us. The classroom felt like a fragile sanctuary, a thin barrier protecting us from the horrors that lurked just outside. We couldn't help but wonder if anyone else in the school had survived, if there were others like us, trapped and hidden away. But the fear of drawing attention to ourselves kept us silent and motionless. Somewhere in the darkest hours of the night, a strange, guttural chant began to rise from the shadows. The haunting words were incomprehensible, and they seemed to emanate from all directions. It sent shivers down our spines, a malevolent melody that seemed to draw the abominations closer to our classroom. We clutched each other even tighter, our breaths shallow and rapid. The chant grew louder, more menacing, and then suddenly it stopped. A bone-chilling silence descended upon the school, broken only by the sound of our own terrified heartbeats. And then, without warning, the lights in our classroom went out. We were plunged into total darkness, the kind of darkness that seems to suffocate you, to press down on your chest and steal your breath. Panic welled up within us, and we fumbled blindly for our phones, hoping to use their feeble light to guide us. As our phones flickered to life, their dim screens revealed a horrifying sight. The grotesque figures were no longer in the hallway. They were inside the classroom with us. Their twisted forms loomed over us, their hollow eyes fixated on our trembling bodies. In that moment, survival instincts kicked in. We bolted towards the classroom window, shattering it with a chair and tumbling out into the moonlit night. We ran as if our lives depended on it, because they did. The school was a nightmare we needed to escape, and the horrors within it were not willing to let us go. We didn't stop running until we were far from that accursed place. The morning sun bathed us in its reassuring warmth, but the terror of that night would never truly leave us. We were the lucky ones who had made it out, but the horrors of the school lockdown would haunt our dreams, a chilling reminder that sometimes, in the darkest corners of the world, unspeakable nightmares await. The school lockdown began like any other, with the shrill sound of the alarm echoing through the corridors. I remember the feeling of annoyance more than anything else, irritation that our precious Friday was being interrupted. Little did I know, this would be a Friday I'd never escape, one that would haunt my every waking moment. As we filed into the designated classroom, the tension was palpable. Something was off, terribly off. The teachers exchanged hushed whispers, their faces pale, their eyes darting to the windows. The air seemed to grow heavy with dread. Minutes turned into hours, and the intercom remained eerily silent. No reassuring voice from the principal, no updates on what was happening. Just silence, and the knowledge that we were trapped, sitting ducks. The lights flickered ominously, casting unsettling shadows on the walls. That's when we heard it, a faint, distant scratching, like claws on a chalkboard. It grew louder, closer, and the fear in the room escalated. The scratching was accompanied by a guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. In the dim light, I could see my classmates' faces contorted with terror. Some wept quietly, while others clutched their textbooks like shields. I exchanged a glance with Sarah, the girl who sat in front of me. Her eyes were wide with terror, and she mouthed, "What is that?" Before I could answer, the classroom door burst open, and a wave of icy dread washed over us. It was a teacher, Mrs. Anderson, but her eyes were empty, devoid of any humanity. She staggered toward us, her movements jerky and unnatural. Blood dripped from her mouth, staining her crisp white blouse. Panic erupted as we realized that Mrs. Anderson was not alone. A horde of similarly twisted figures poured into the room, their faces contorted in grotesque, inhuman expressions. They moved with an uncanny, predatory grace, like a pack of hungry wolves closing in on their prey. Chaos erupted as we scrambled for cover, but there was nowhere to run. The room became a nightmarish battleground, with desperate students fighting for their lives against these unholy intruders. Amid the chaos, I caught a glimpse of Mark, his face etched in terror as he fought off one of the creatures. I reached out, but he was swept away into the writhing mass of bodies, his screams drowning in the cacophony of horror. Time lost all meaning as the nightmarish battle raged on, and I clung to survival with a desperation I had never known. Every moment felt like an eternity, each scream a dagger to the soul. When the authorities finally arrived, The creatures vanished into thin air, leaving behind a scene of unimaginable carnage. The school was in ruins, and many of my classmates were missing, including Mark. Years have passed since that horrifying school lockdown, but the nightmares persist. I'm haunted by the memory of those twisted, otherworldly intruders and the knowledge that they are still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. The school was never the same after that day, and neither was I. I live in constant fear, knowing that the boundary between our world and whatever malevolent realm those creatures came from is thinner than we could ever imagine. And as I look back on that fateful Friday, I can't help but wonder if it was a deliberate trap, a horrifying initiation into a world of unspeakable terror. Years have passed since that horrific school lockdown, but its malevolent presence still lingers in the deepest recesses of my mind. The incident had left an indelible mark not just on me, but on the entire town. The school had become an abandoned, decaying monument to the horrors we had witnessed, its windows boarded up, its halls haunted by the memories of that day. My search for answers continued, an obsession that consumed my every waking moment. I scoured ancient texts, consulted with experts in the paranormal, and even ventured into the most forbidden corners of the internet. What I discovered was a chilling truth that went far beyond anything I had ever imagined. The creatures that had invaded our school were not of this world. They were emissaries from a realm of pure darkness and malevolence, drawn to our fear and despair like moths to a flame. They had been summoned, intentionally or accidentally, by a force beyond our comprehension. As I delved deeper into the mysteries surrounding the incident, I uncovered a name whispered only in the darkest of legends, the entity of shadows. It was said to be a primordial being, a harbinger of doom, and a collector of souls. The lockdown had been its twisted game, a sadistic hunt for prey. Determined to confront this entity and put an end to its reign of terror, I embarked on a dangerous quest. Armed with ancient rituals and incantations, I sought to open a portal to the realm of shadows and confront the malevolent force that had tormented us. The night I performed the ritual was a nightmarish blur of incense, candles, and eerie chants. The room seemed to pulsate with an otherworldly energy, and I could feel the presence of the entity of shadows drawing closer, its hunger for our souls growing stronger. As the ritual reached its climax, a portal to the realm of shadows opened before me. The room was filled with a bone-chilling cold, and from the darkness beyond, I heard a whisper, a voice like the rustling of leaves in a graveyard. It spoke in a language I couldn't understand, ancient and incomprehensible. With trembling resolve, I confronted the entity, demanding answers and an end to its torment. It loomed before me, a swirling mass of darkness, a shapeless void with eyes that burned like dying stars. It spoke not with words, but with visions of unspeakable horrors, memories of the lockdown, and the faces of those it had claimed. I fought to maintain my sanity as I faced the entity of shadows, resisting the overwhelming terror it sought to instill in me. The battle of wills raged on, a struggle for control over the very fabric of reality itself. In the end, I managed to seal the portal, vanishing the entity back to its dark realm. But the cost was immense. I had glimpsed the true nature of the universe, the incomprehensible darkness that lurked beyond our understanding, and it had left scars on my soul that would never heal. The school remained abandoned, a grim reminder of the horrors we had endured. I often wonder if the entity of shadows still watches, waiting for its next opportunity to cross over into our world. And as I look back on that fateful school lockdown, I can't help but wonder if it was a deliberate trap, a horrifying initiation into a reality far more terrifying than anything we had ever imagined.